Good morning, everyone. I'm Karen. What a great turnout this morning. We're very excited to start the panel. And we're privileged to have with us, you have the best of the best when it comes to business on this panel. This morning, we'll be talking about essentially, we're seeing shifts all over the world, policy shifts in the West, and how Asia's doing business has essentially changed. There's growing protectionism in the US. Many countries are looking inward as well. And the IMF report says that essentially if that continues to happen, that Asian businesses will be affected and economic growth in Asia will be stifled at a point if this continues. So the issue right now is how can Asian businesses essentially transcend these challenges? So this morning we have with us, I'll start with Serge. You already know him. He chairs Yoma Strategic Holdings, and he's the chairman of the SPA Group. He's a success story, of course, in his own right. He owns 2 flagship companies. And from a property owner, it's now become a conglomerate with interests in tourism, consumer goods, retail, aviation, housing developments, hospitals, and banking. Can you give him a hand? And up next is Tessie Kazan. Tessie Kazan has been called one of Asia's most powerful business women. Wow. She's the vice chair of the,
I'm scared.
Yes.
That's my friend.
She's the vice chair of SMIC. It is the largest publicly listed conglomerate in the Philippine Stock Exchange. And of course, you know that from a small shoe store, SM now has more than 60 malls all over the Philippines, and it has 7 in China. She's the chairman of BDO, which is the largest bank in the Philippines with more than 1,000 branches worldwide. SMIC is worth roughly, actually 1/3 of the local stock exchange in the Philippines. So let's put it at that, at roughly $50 billion. All right, last but not the least is we have Kwon. He's fondly called KP, and he's one of Singapore's most prominent businessmen. And I'd like to add this year, he's actually chairing the Singapore Summit. Congratulations to you on that. He was actually a journalist. Would you believe that? He was a journalist who
that
turned...
was bad old days.
Yeah, I know. And he turned to be a hotelier. Of course, he's famous for actually heading Banyan Tree. Banyan Tree right now has more than 40 hotels worldwide, and they carry 4 brands. So we're going to hear from them essentially this morning how to carry on in the next 20 years with several disruptions. I'd like to ask you at this point first to give an overview. What is the biggest challenge that your personal businesses face today? Because you would have different risks. So I'll start first with KP.
Well, I think I can talk about my particular industry.
Yeah.
And then maybe just a word about business in general in the context of what you said earlier. I think in terms of my own business, it's clearly event risk. Of course, the hospitality industry goes up and down with normal business cycles and so on, but business cycles are the least of our concerns. Event risk in the sense of health risk, you've got SARS, you've got epidemics, and that affects tourism immediately. You've got political risk, coup d'etats, revolutions, immediately that affects us. Terrorism. So natural disasters like tsunamis. We just had at one of our resorts in Cuba, we had Hurricane Irma go right over our hotel. We had to evacuate everybody at the last minute because the hurricane shifted directions. So people in the tourism industry aren't at all phased when you talk about protectionism, business cycles. We've got real event risk to worry about, right. Both the plus and the negative side. For example, all resorts in Asia today, right now, during what should be a lull season, is doing really well because every single European and his kids are coming to Asia. Nobody's going to Barcelona. Nobody's going to Southern Mediterranean. Everybody who is on vacation in Europe are coming to Asia as opposed to going is remaining in Europe because of terrorism. So for my industry, really it's about event risk, and the only way to deal with that systematically is to be as resilient as you can be all the time, because you never can predict event risk. Now on the larger context about Asia as a whole, when you talked about protectionism and all the big changes that are happening, one of the things that I try to bear in mind, and I think other people in Asia try to bear in mind, is not to get too caught up with the immediacy of what seems to be happening. All my friends in the West are now worried as hell about the decline of Pax Americana, and is America going into an eventual terminal decline? Everybody who's an Asian triumphalist is talking about how China is going to bury the West as Japan was going to and Russia had wanted to. And I think between the two extremes, we have to remember something else, and that is that, in my view, the real catchword for the future is an old movie from the 1980s called Back to the Future, if you remember that.
Yes.
It was a science fiction movie where the guy had to go to the past.
To the 50s.
In order to see the future.
Yeah.
I think we need to go back a few hundred years to see the future. And a few hundred years ago, there were co-equal civilizations in the West and the East, in the Middle East, that all existed a bit, sometimes not that collaboratively, but they all existed and coexisted and competed equally under the sun. This whole notion of civilizational dominance by one civilization, which is Western civilization, was only in the last 300 years. And I'm not alluding to it in a bad way. I'm not going to be talking about colonialism, etc. For some very good reasons, the West ascended to be dominant all over the world with the rule of law, scientific method, and many other reasons. But we must not assume that that is the natural state of affairs. Neither should we assume that China is going to be like what people talked about Japan, and Japan is number one, which is a very quaint idea now. So in the whole context of everything, I think we just have to bear in mind that the next 100 years will likely be one where China is going to be far more powerful than before. America will gain back its mojo, and the rest of us in the world just have to navigate within this world and not get too upset about dominance by one or the other.
All right, that's how hip you are, that you actually know the word mojo. I'm quite impressed. All right, okay.
You know,
all right,
I'm
I'm just kidding.
I am absolutely insulted. I
you
just
have to
turned
remember,
65 last week, but
good.
But 65 is, according to the Japanese, 65.
The new 40.
No, 65 is considered late middle age.
God, that's too late.
No,
right.
middle,
but
early.
Moving forward, okay, but yeah. And you have 60%, we talked about 60% of the world's activity is now in Asia. Tessie, if you can correct me here, most if not all of your businesses are essentially in Asia. You've expanded already. I mean, from the Philippines, you're one of the first businesses that actually built outside. You have 7 malls in China, and I know you're looking at Myanmar. What are the challenges that you face essentially right now with how the world's changing, with expanding in Asia and doing more business?
No, we're basically more Philippine-centric.
Okay.
We do have malls in China, and it's doing well. We were not disrupted by all of the changes in the Chinese economic perceptions. The perceptions of the changes in the China economy. Now, China economy is going back, and so it's good for us. In the Philippines, well, we have this fear about the geopolitical because of where we are. We're near Korea. We of course have this Marawi conflict.
Yeah.
But overall, the business has been okay. We of course, with the protectionism from the U.S. and the AI, our business processing outsource has been affected in the sense that it is not growing as much, and that was supposed to be one of those that will bring our country more inflow, and the other one is of course there's this digital disruptions, but I think we are blessed by the fact that we're not a very advanced country. Things are a bit slow, so maybe our broadband is a bit slow, so all the jobs are intact. Things are socially, we're still okay. So I guess we will be working on all of this technology advancement. We will work on omni-channel, but we can take our time. So I guess that's about, and of course the climate change, which like the banyan tree, we would have problems in terms of when there's problems in the horizon, our consumer sales will be affected.
Serge, I know you're also in the retail business, and Myanmar is a bright spot in Asia, and they said it will be growing. Possibly it can recapture what they call the superstardomness of Vietnam. Do you see that coming soon?
I not only see that coming soon, I think that is inevitable. For sure, I think Myanmar would be a very bright star in the next, say, 10, 15, 20 years.
What did Myanmar do to make foreign direct investments much easier to get in the country? Because that's one of the challenges in the Philippines right now.
Yes, I think Myanmar has got one advantage, which is a latecomer's advantage. We've seen a lot of mistakes that everybody else did. We also see the good things that they did. And we're trying to pick, the success stories. We're trying to avoid the failures. So we probably have that little advantage. But Myanmar, as it is, it's not a blank sort of country. Myanmar has a very rich history. It was very wealthy. For instance, right now, talking about today and not past glory, we have a 90% mobile phone penetration today. We went from 0G 5 years ago to 4G in one jump. So we have 90% penetration, and 80% of that 90% is smartphones. So today, if you're talking of the digital world, the fourth industrial revolution, you might be pleasantly surprised that Myanmar would probably advance much quicker in the fourth industrial revolution than any other more advanced economies where the old system and the old ways are still there and you have to remove it or you have to revamp it. Well, we have a clean sheet, so we can start. For ourselves, for instance, you asked just now about the challenges. I think, for me, the challenges that are beyond our control, like disasters, natural disasters, even political disasters, I mean, they're outside of our control, so I wouldn't pay too much time on it. What we are most concerned is things that are within our control and where we are not paying enough attention to.
Which are?
Which are, for instance, the new world of digitization.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, the technology is really going to take over a lot of things. You like it or not, it's going to come. And if you're one step behind or two steps behind, I don't think it's very charitable. You just get wiped out. Okay? So we are trying to be not left out just because of our lethargy, not thinking fast enough, not concentrating enough. So we're putting a lot of emphasis on how to be relevant in this new era. Okay, that's one thing we're looking at. The second thing we're focusing very heavily is on human resource. I mean, a lot of talk, management lessons and all that, always talk about human capital and how important people are. But I feel that there's a little bit of confusion now with all the robots and all the artificial intelligence coming on and so forth. The importance of people in being the real root, the real strength of any organization gets eroded somehow. And so we're putting a lot of emphasis on building up a corporate value system, which you might call it corporate culture, corporate DNA, which will take us a long way. And it is, I hope that we would reach a stage where one day it's not something you got to keep on preaching. It's something that will just become a habit. It's embedded into the DNA of all our employees, and you don't have to really try very hard.
Yeah.
It's a norm.
Okay, let's talk about the battle against becoming obsolete with all the technological disruptions we're seeing now. And then, of course, your challenges would be different from that. But the way business is done has changed. And we're seeing, I mean, all over the world, when Uber came in, you had taxi companies, you had politicians, laborers that actually protested the coming of Uber, you know, because they felt they might lose their jobs. So in terms of your business, I'll go back to Tessie again. How do you do it that one day you make it a point that people are still coming into the malls, you have more people shopping online? How do you ensure that malls still stay relevant to essentially shoppers?
I guess in terms of the stores, we'll just have to make it more of omni-channel, which is
Okay. What is that?
in store and online.
Okay.
And the deliveries will be, it can be delivered in the store, collect in the store, or delivered to them. So I guess we have to change. And the way that the stores will look, it will become more of a showcase. And it will gradually change. And then in the mall will have to be more of a lifestyle and perhaps offices.
Yeah.
So
Is it true you're putting up or you have a football field on top of one of the malls? You're planning that?
I don't know.
If
Because
it'll
it
work.
will be, but it will be more on the sustainable area, not
Yeah,
really
yeah.
for football,
But-
but really more of green.
Okay, green.
That's for
okay.
the sustainability.
That would take it like to the next century.
Well, most of our buildings in the futures will have to be covered by greens, and it can also be a garden with restaurants. It will have to
Yeah.
be more of a lifestyle in the
Yeah.
future. I think many people are doing that. So, or perhaps have a lot of the solar panels.
Okay. And you do. Right
Yes, we
now,
do.
you practice that.
Yeah, so new technology will bring in a different way of doing things. So I think as long as we make effort to stay relevant, I think we'll still be there.
Yeah. What about you, Serge? How do you battle against being obsolete?
Well,
Not you personally, of course.
I
That's
think,
what we wanted, a little humor in the panel. We asked for that. I said, let's make it engaging to the
I think me included,
Yeah, okay.
because many years ago, when we just got listed in Singapore 2006, the common question that I get from every investor relationship meetings, every analyst is, what is your succession plan?
Yeah.
I said,
Which is
boy,
a
I've just
real
started,
issue.
and people keep asking me about succession plan, like when you leave. So,
Yeah.
well, coming to your question, I think at this stage and age, I think to be relevant, you really have to find your niche on where your value is.
Yeah.
For instance, we're in tourism. Okay?
Yes.
We've just started going big in tourism. We've started
So you're competing with Banyan Tree.
no, we're learning and following their
okay.
steps, right? And much of our model is based on their model.
Okay. Why not?
We're getting obsolete.
Yeah.
But you see, in the context of Myanmar, tourism is a low-hanging fruit, and everybody wants to come to Myanmar. But we have to make a choice. Do we want that 200 million tourists from China? The answer is no.
Really?
No.
We want them in the Philippines.
You might want to.
Yeah.
We don't.
Okay.
And the reason is that, first of all, we don't have the infrastructure to accommodate 200 million. Second, we don't have the workforce to clean up whatever they do after they leave,
Oh my God.
right? And to repair all the damage. So I don't think we want it now. We want the top, maybe 5%,
All right.
who are willing to pay a premium,
And clean.
who come for a slightly different purpose. So typically, the people we bring in are people who love culture, who wants to know the history of the country, not ask you where's the first shopping center,
Yeah.
Oh, that's
They,
sad.
yeah, they want.
Yeah, that's right.
There's always a conflict somewhere, right? But then who also want to know about your country, so we'll throw in a seminar on the country, on politics, on law, taxation, whatever. They want to get some knowledge, using, say, 3 hours of that whole 7-day journey. And then they want to really get good service, the right times to fly. Right now, for instance, Banyan is a destination everybody has to go.
Okay.
All the flights leaving Rangoon, Yangon to Banyan, flights at 6:15 in the morning, which means you, poor tourists, have to get up at 4:30, get to the airport at 5:30 to catch that flight, right? No choice, because all the airlines go on a hop, starts at 6:15 and go one round and come back. So we started an airline.
Oh, you started the airline,
We started an airline, and we say, you can fly at 9:30 to Banyan, have your breakfast, take your time, and we'll charge you 60% more than what the other guy charges.
Yeah.
But in the percentage-wise, it's great. Quantum-wise, you're paying maybe $50 more.
Yeah.
So you ask yourself, am I willing to pay $50 to have a nice sleep until 7 a.m.?
But is the airline profitable at this point already, would you
Well,
say?
the airline will never be profitable in the beginning, and most airlines, if you want to become poor, buy an airline.
Okay, okay, all right. Okay, but let me continue now with KP. That's a good one in terms of disruption. You have Airbnb, and you have, I'm just going to continue, you have millennials that, as you say, want the experience. They'll probably visit the same area but won't go to Banyan Tree.
That's okay, if I could.
Go, please,
I'd
sir.
like to answer this question wearing a different hat. That's
Okay.
as chairman of Singapore Management University. I think in all our businesses, we're affected by digital disruption. And in mine, Airbnb or whatever it might be. But I think most of us are not aware, and we've studied this a lot at SMU, of how real the problem is. And it's really at the doorsteps of, in fact, a lot of developing countries.
Everyone's a hotelier.
Well,
Everyone who
you see,
owns a house.
Well, no, one concept that economists have really used is a concept called premature deindustrialization.
I see.
Okay, let me explain that, because
go.
most people don't, they think that digital disruptions is going to only happen at the level of what's actually happening in the US. So it's the gig economy, the sharing economy, and so on. And if we're not involved in that, we're okay. But in fact, countries like Myanmar, countries like Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia are all going to be very badly hit. And the concept of premature industrialization is along the lines that essentially every country in the past has gone through a path of industrialization through providing cheap labor and then going up the ladder that way. Premature deindustrialization means that you also deindustrialize afterwards, like the US, now focusing more on services, etc. Premature industrialization is about how your path to industrialization is suddenly stopped short. Now let me give you just one example. The ILO, International Labour Office, has predicted that 85% of Vietnam's textile industry will be wiped out in 15 to 20 years. And that's because in the past, the textile industry or the garments industry required such dexterity of work that while everything else has been automated, nobody's ever automated the garments industry. You have to sew so many things. Due to a number of things that's happening, and it's everywhere it's available in terms of the technology, they've actually added things so that every piece of garment that you're going to sew can easily become rigid. And once it's rigid, they can automate the sewing of it. So there's a whole world of technology that's about probably 3-4 years away. When that happens, you're going to get a lot of previously low-cost labor type of industries, like garments, which were previously protected from robotics. That's going to be very seriously affected. What are the countries going to do in Asia that are developing, that always thought that so long as we have cheap labor, we're okay? Robotics is only going to affect high-cost countries. That's not the case. That's a big worry that I think a lot of people who are concerned about economic development is worried about. Another one would be fintech and law tech. And like in our own university, we're really already facing the prospect that a lot of our accountants who are going to join the workforce as junior accountants doing kind of number crunching is going to be replaced by artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence isn't that little robot that you see in Star Wars who speaks back to you.
Yeah.
Artificial intelligence is a whole lot of algorithms so that if you want to be a chartered financial analyst looking at charts and doing that as a junior analyst, you won't have a job anymore. Hedge funds, private equity funds, stock brokerages are all going to replace thousands of junior financial analysts with fintech, as is already happening. Law tech, if you're a junior lawyer today, you start out doing your first 5 years doing research for a senior lawyer, looking at old cases and taking out things, right?
Yes.
That can all be done now by artificial intelligence. So we tend to think of robotics as these little funny robots that walk around the room. We think of artificial intelligence as this computer that talks back to you and is going to have the soul and conscience of a human being. That's what all the movies talk about. But the reality of robotics and artificial intelligence is very real. And I think the impact it's going to have on developing countries is going to be worse than what we thought. So it's not Airbnb, which is a Western phenomenon.
Yes.
It's not Uber, which is a Western phenomenon. It's the very businesses that developing countries used to depend on that might be threatened. And it's for our graduates. It's our young graduates who thought that a career in law and in accountancy and in banking were the great things to be. They're going to find there are very few jobs in those sectors left. That's going to be a big challenge for the governments of Asia.
That's an eye-opener, and you paint a very bleak picture, but I'm glad you brought it up.
No, it's bleak because not enough people recognize
that
it is a real threat.
Absolutely.
So, and that's why government, universities, all of us have that responsibility to not simply follow what the media is talking about digital disruption. We're not worried about Uber. We're not worried about Airbnb. That may be things happening elsewhere. We need to be worried about the textile industry. We need to be worried about essentially a lot of businesses relocating back to the US, not just to please Donald Trump, but simply because the economics of robotics is going to make so many businesses really no longer competitive in Asia. China today, you'll be reading about it probably, a lot of businesses in China have already adopted robotics because Chinese labor is already too expensive. If they do that in China, can you imagine what's going to happen to unemployment in China?
Yeah. So I think, Tessie, Serge, there's a whole other aspect to this. It's not just the math, but essentially it's also really the moral perspective of giving people jobs. Bill Gates was once quoted that he believes that if AI actually replaces the job of somebody who can do it, that company should pay more taxes or tax that particular post. Right now, nobody's paying attention to it, but when you talk about it in that way,
it seemed to be stupid when people said, "Oh, well, let's go and tax a robot."
Yeah,
but he's absolutely right, because the person who is going to be replaced by a robot, what are they going to do? They have to be retrained. Who's going to provide the money to retrain them? You're talking about poor countries. So he's absolutely right. It sounds stupid, but the reality of it is, if we're going to have an ecosystem where you're not going to have thousands of workers be thrown out of jobs, with the governments of the region being too poor to retrain them, then companies should recognize that if in the longer run I can save X $1,000 by basically adopting robotics, then perhaps the government is right to charge me X divided by however amount, a portion of X, I should pay not just to the government, most of which are corrupt in Asia, but maybe I should put it into a fund that maybe my own company would administer. I think a lot of companies are much more willing to do that. We don't want to give money to governments. We would much rather say, if I'm a factory today and I have to replace 10,000 workers, maybe I have to create a fund so that the 10,000 workers who are going to be replaced, I have to retrain them in certain areas so that at least they have a better prospect of survival.
Yeah, very good point. Serge, Tessie, I think being tycoons, the level that you've reached, no, you do also face that moral, you sleep at night not just counting the numbers, but you do count how many jobs you've provided. How do we actually uplift a particular community? How do we make sure that there's inclusive business in these small communities?
In the Philippines, a lot of people are critical about how slow things are and how whether our government or private sectors or our broadband, in a way, it's blessing because the pacing of the digitization is a bit slow.
Yeah.
And with that, we're still growing the job creations. For us in our company, we have been providing a lot of jobs, and we have not really delete any jobs at all. As a matter of fact, and whenever we open a new malls, we do take in a lot of people. So in a way, so that's reasons why we're also very Philippine-centric, because we don't have to compete in the digitizations. I know a lot of people want to come in, but if the foreign companies come in and our broadband is slow, how much business can you do? So the business is left to us.
But that won't be good in the long run, right?
Well, yeah,
go to the
but
mall.
I know in developed countries like Singapore, everybody's racing. Here we might be racing, but we don't run as fast. And then I've been to Myanmar. I saw a lot of opportunities. And so maybe in the future, Myanmar may grow faster than us, but I guess life in the Philippines will still be okay.
Yeah.
Because we're a bit slow. So there is wisdom in that.
When you say slow, I want to contextualize it because
relatively to other countries.
yeah, but then you have the Philippines growing at 6.5% roughly. I mean, in ASEAN they call it. I mean, it's the country essentially that's growing the most. Before I move to Myanmar, to what do you attribute that? And I think what you had essentially meant is the pace is good because Filipinos, the majority of Filipinos have to actually also keep pace with the need for advanced education. So it makes sense. But to what do you attribute the growth of the Philippines?
You see, the Philippines have not been growing much about maybe more than a decade ago. So we're just catching up.
Okay.
And the distributions of I should not say distribution, maybe distributions of wealth has been going also to the provincial area by natural evolutions. And in the past, most of the businesses have been concentrated in the city proper. Right now, I can say that they have been developing throughout the country. And with that, they have some areas have been growing faster. So it sort of gives the whole country an average growth of about 6%.
Yeah. Okay. Serge, would you want to contribute first before I continue?
I think I just got an idea. I got to go back and tell our people to slow down our broadband.
Yeah.
But you're in that business.
And tell your tourists to do visit the malls.
That's right. That's right.
All right. No, but go on, Serge.
Well, Myanmar's growth is going to be, I think, double-digit, honestly.
Really?
Only because...
But no Asian country's been double-digit. Huh?
Well,
I mean, China's the last.
But the
that's
difference is that
distant
our
past.
base is very low.
Yeah.
See, when you have a low base,
Okay.
you could do it.
I see.
See, we're starting from an extremely low base. So to give a better result is not as difficult as when you are starting from a higher base.
Okay.
See? So of all the countries you're mentioning, particularly in Asia, we're now the lowest. Okay? So for us to really get a 1%, 2%, 3% growth, it's really not difficult. Okay? The amount of investments has been earmarked for infrastructure in the coming, say, decade. Okay? And these are job infrastructure work that has to be done regardless. Okay? They're very basic things that needs to be done. You know, I'm referring to power. I'm referring to roads, rails. I mean, power, for instance, we're probably the last country that is very, very short of power. You know, Philippines used to have so many brownouts, and yet one presidential regime. I remember.
No, I guess it's a gradual thing.
Yes.
And right now we're doing well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's no problem anymore.
Yeah.
See, so power is a kind of thing that can be solved with the right policy. You implement it, and given a reasonable time, it will be solved. But we haven't even got to that. our power deficiency is so big. So we all realize that that's got to be solved. And the investment in the power sector is itself huge.
Yeah.
Let alone roads, transport, logistics, all that has to come. So the investments that are going into Myanmar, and I'd like to just take this opportunity, please bear with me, to give you a 35-second pitch. We have decided, or the Myanmar, the Yangon divisional government has decided to launch one of the biggest mega projects that you can imagine, and that is the building of the new Yangon city across the river, which it will be Putong, Puxi Putong. It will be basically a replica of Putong. Right now it's all paddy fields going about 25, 30 kilometers right out to the sea. So that whole region is going to emerge a new city called New Yangon, a la Delhi, New Delhi. This would be Yangon, New Yangon. And it would be, I don't know, easily a couple of $100 billion.
So you will invite us in?
Yeah.
All of you, this is my sales pitch here.
Yeah. Are you building this?
I will be involved in building this.
Yeah.
It will be, it's a government job. But they've given me a great task to build this new city with no money.
Yeah. So are you going to take a loan or a grant? How are you going to do this?
No money, full stop.
Okay.
So the only way to build this is if I can get the whole world to participate as partners. So investors will have tremendous opportunities.
Yeah.
For instance, just to give you one small example, we are not going to rely on the national grid for power. Why? Because it's not reliable, and even if I'm connected to the national grid, I may not get power for 24 hours.
Yeah.
Which defeats the purpose. A factory cannot operate with 23 hours power. You have to have 24 hours.
So where are you going to get the power?
So the power will be generated. Investors will come to generate the power. But instead of just generating the power and sell it to the grid with a PPA, which is a normal thing, we would say, okay, you generate the power, you distribute the power. You will become a utility company, and the concession is for the next 30 years.
Okay.
You figure out how you're going to make your money. I would only demand two things. You must produce as much power as I need. Mm-hmm. It must be stable power.
Yeah.
And you cannot jack up the power price anytime you want, every other week, just because you're managing your company badly.
Yes, yeah.
So that kind of opportunities, we're asking for people who want to invest in power, distribute power, to come.
Yeah. Okay. Now, going back, I think you should wear your SMU hat with this, following from that. You've also talked about people earlier on. Is the IMF notes that medium-term risks in Asia essentially involve that, this one surprised me, that the population in Asia is actually aging. So I usually thought, oh, Europe's old. I thought that, and then turns out that here's a new study that says the population in Asia is aging.
China is one of the fastest.
Okay, and apparently the irony is the IMF advises that there should be more productivity convergence in Asia, wherein Asia isn't actually as productive as it should be. So that was an eye-opener when I read that report as one of the risks, essentially, for many businesses. Can you put a context to that? Is Asia as a region not as productive? Have we not maximized ourselves?
I think the IMF's, the larger context is that generally business people tend to think that if you have a lower cost, wage cost environment, that gives you a lot of room for productivity increases and so on. But I think the IMF is alluding to demographic trends.
Okay.
And the demographic trends that are happening now is an aging process all across Asia, which most people are not aware of. They think it's only a developed country phenomenon. But as I just mentioned, China is one of the fastest aging economies in the world, largely because of the one-child policy.
Okay.
The other thing that people are not aware of that impacts on productivity is what economists call labor force participation rate. And that's essentially to deal with how many percentage of a particular age cohort are already working.
Yeah.
In Asia, it's already a large number of people. Particularly women in Asia are already working quite a lot. So when they look at countries that we think don't have a lot of room for growth and productivity, in fact, some of these countries are countries where women have not entered the labor force, where older people have not entered the labor force. So you can get through sheer numbers of them people coming in, the productivity increases. In Asia, in China, for example, people are talking about the difficulties of squeezing more productivity out of China because the female labor force participation rate in China is already very, very high. All of us know anecdotally, almost every single woman works in China. And China is also aging very rapidly, although we might not think so, because it's such a new economy, so to speak. But because of the one-child policy, the charts show China is going off the wall in terms of aging. So broadly speaking, I think the IMF is indicating something that most of us as business people are not aware of. And that is there are hidden trends below the water. We only see the tip of the iceberg and we think, oh, if this country has got cheap labor, it's got a potential, it's good. But a lot of other things are happening that puts us at risk. And I say this not to be a pessimist, but simply because too many of us who are Asian business people are deluded by our own PR.
Oh my God, that's good, huh? Really?
I think it's true. I mean, you look at Asian people today, we all look at the US and we say, well, Donald Trump has made America last, not first. We look at Brexit and we say, we give up on Europe. And we say, look, we are the 21st century. And as an Asian businessman, I think the biggest danger for us is to have hubris. You look at all our Japanese friends in the early 1990s, Japan as #1, nothing could go wrong. All my Chinese friends now, I'm warning them, don't think China's upward trajectory is forever, because if you do, you're going to be hit as the Japanese were. And I think, and being a very passionate Asian businessman, obviously I want the Asian century to last. But I don't think it's going to last if we all beat our chests and say, the West is finished, and now it's Asia's century. We don't have to do anything. We have no problems. We are perfect. We are on for a long ride. I think nothing is further from the truth. There's a lot of work ahead for us. We have a lot of problems. We have huge potential, but we should never delude ourselves into thinking this is going to become a natural Asian century.
Tessie, in the Philippines, one of the challenges actually is there are jobs, but people often ask, are they quality jobs? Manufacturing is quite low. You also have the IMF saying that actually a country, even how small it is, will experience great growth in terms of the quality of the people if it's a country that is a source of innovation. And I don't know if many Asian countries are actually the source of innovation. Do you feel your labor workforce, what kind of workforce are you expecting?
Our labor workforce is not very skilled. And that has been one of the advantage, actually, if you look at it another way. It's
you're like honesty pill today. You took one.
Because look, we talk about the aging generations, and in the Philippines, I would look at it another way. In the Philippines, we have a lot of youth populations. A lot of them are under 23 years of age. And I thought that perhaps we can train them and send them abroad and be healthcare people and English teachers. And that will bring in a lot of remittances to the Philippines. And here in the Philippines also, we never expect a lot. So I think we can weather through all of this development.
You mean as a race, as a people?
As a country, we never expect a lot of growth, a lot of development. We went through life accepting what is our fate. So it is only this time that people are looking to the Philippines thinking that maybe Philippines is not bad after all. And it's not bad. It's just that you have to have a lot of patience and you will be rewarded. So I think it's a matter of changing the way we think, the way we do work for any disruptions in the future.
But is Asia paying attention, honestly, to the value of education? Because both you have the WEF, IMF, ADB, all of them that essentially say that to build the next generation is you actually have to put value on advancing education. And I know it's not sexy to talk about it right now, but it's, you know, there's big inequality in Asia, and the Asian population, most of it, a bulk of it, doesn't really benefit from advanced education.
Yeah.
Yeah, do you see that as a challenge in your business?
Yes.
Yes.
The challenge is actually quite serious. I think there was a professor who from Oxford who came just the last year and was there to help Myanmar
Yeah.
upgrade the University of Rangoon, which at one time was one of the best universities in Asia. And I remember him having a meeting with the Minister of Education, and then later on with Aung San Suu Kyi, and everybody is saying the same thing. We need education, we need education. So he's got all worked up, right? And then he came to see me, and we had a nice chat. My point is that you can spend a lot of money trying to do up this university, but if you're not going to give a test to the professors first
Okay.
and see how many of them do not qualify to teach,
Okay. All right.
you're never going to get
It's
anything.
the quality
Yeah.
of the teachers. Okay.
Because that's the first bottleneck, okay?
Okay.
People who are teaching are actually not really qualified.
Yeah,
to
so
teach.
do you see that as a challenge
Big
in most of Asia? Because
Well,
it's not a challenge in
no.
Singapore.
I won't say
Japan.
most of
Yeah.
Asia. China did a very good job. When the schools reopened after the Cultural Revolution, the first wave of tests is the professors, the teachers. They have to be regraded before they can teach, right? This didn't happen in
Yeah.
many Asian countries.
Yeah. Okay, quickly.
I
Katie.
think education is a problem in Asia.
Yeah.
The one saving grace we have is that, broadly speaking, almost all Asian civilizations, whether it be from India to China to Burma or anywhere else, value education as a fundamental value,
Yeah.
which many other societies might not. That having been said, though, I think the educational system has largely failed the needs of our young people.
Yeah.
China has done a lot, but China has got a real problem today. For example, China has got something like 8,000 universities that grew over the last 2 decades. China is now producing something like 8 million graduates every year, and it's getting hard to find jobs for them. To summarize it, the biggest problem I think we have in Asia is there's been culturally a great respect for educated people, but not for highly skills trained people.
Good point.
We've been trying, even in Singapore, to get the German system of apprenticeship and vocational training as being a very respectable career,
Yeah.
to be a vocationalist,
Yeah, yeah.
to be a very skilled builder.
Yeah.
Like in Australia, you can have a very good life as a builder, you can have a very good life as a plumber. There are guilds where you can be a master plumber, you can have all kinds of ceremonies
It's true.
that value skills.
Yeah. Asians look down to that.
Asians look down on
Yeah,
that. Asians,
I agree.
everybody wants to be a graduate.
Yeah.
We don't train, and then governments meet the requirements by having a lot of universities that train people who are all in the liberal arts and sciences, and we don't have enough emphasis on skills training. And I think that is becoming, the chickens are basically coming home to roost now with robotics and automation and everything else. We don't have technicians.
Yeah. Tessie?
Yeah, training, education should be a continuing training. And for the private company, I guess we'd have to also train them on the skill that we need them for. So it's not just the advanced education, it's more of a continuing training to change the way they do things to meet the demand of the future. So I think it will have to be more on skill training. And in our company, we are promoting we're starting to promote a lot of the skill training, because with that, they don't have to work for us, but they can always find a job or do a lot of business of their own little businesses.
Yeah. Okay. We have 10 minutes to go, but I'm going to open the floor so to questions. Oh, there you go, your first one. Before I ask them to leave some words of wisdom for all of you on how to make your first billion. Would you want that? Okay, ma'am, there's a microphone. Is there a microphone? Can you stand up, madam? Yeah, because this is recorded, televised, or I don't know how you say it now. It's YouTube.
There's no mics.
Okay, go ahead, ma'am.
My question is to KP. I worked at the National University of Singapore, and I recruited quarterly economy school all over the world. And 8 years back, it was still a problem to get students from the West to come and study here. And our topic today is wisdom and worldview. So as somebody who has actually steered SMU, what value proposition do you see that Asia and Singapore offers to a student studying in the West to draw them here? And what are you doing to keep your own citizens and also students from India and China to select SMU over a comparable university in the West?
I think the simplest answer to that is, do you know where is the headquarters of INSEAD, the business school?
Yeah.
Singapore. Why did they choose Singapore? There's two headquarters, there's Fontainebleau and there's Singapore. It started by being equally dual campus, and now the headquarters is in Singapore. What's the reason for that? Singapore is the eye to success in Asia. Singapore is a window to the world.
Yeah.
We are not the world. We truly are a window to what's happening in Asia, both in terms of geography. If you want to fly to China, you want to fly to Indonesia, fly to India, you want to be not only within flying distance, but I would call it intellectual distance. One of the problems now that the US clearly is having is that because of the politics in the US being so fractured and so politicized, everything is now the worldview for people in America and intellectuals in America, including academics, it's all internalized. Everybody is radicalized around what's happening with the polarization of the US. And so it's so US-centric. The advantage of Singapore in terms of our size is, you can't get too worked up about Singapore politics. You can't get too worked up about anything in Singapore.
This
is a great place for you to understand what's happening in India, in China, in Burma and elsewhere. So we are a great collection of intellects in Asia, and you're finding that a lot of students are coming from the rest of the world because they feel that if the future of the world in terms of business is in Asia, Singapore's a very good place to be for that.
No, all right, that's a good one. Okay, so no more questions. I'd like to ask each of our panelists. Essentially, this is more personal because, you have, each of you, well, at least I know two of them. Well, you were a journalist, so journalists have exciting lives. But your stories are very inspiring for those that actually want to make it in business. I mean, you would never think one point that Serge was penniless. No one would ever imagine that today. And yet you've made history in your own country. You listed in 2011. You were the first in Myanmar to list. Your next company, you listed in Singapore, and you're growing. You've partnered with many foreign companies. I mean, I read that you're partnering with a Norwegian firm, a US firm. Are you buying into KFC?
No, you can't buy in. You've got to be awarded.
All right.
The national franchisee. So.
Okay, so if I were to ask you right now, I mean, what would be the secret? I mean, I know it's a cliche question, but you believe the secret to your success, how it took you here, what would it be?
The secret is to keep it secret.
Oh, really? I mean, could you share? Was there a tipping point at one point in your career when this happened and it changed things, it turned the tide?
No, I think, to be honest, joking aside, I mean, there is really no secret per se. When you succeed, I think there are a few factors that come to play.
Yeah.
One
because
is
some
that,
people work hard all their lives.
yes, you have to work hard.
That's
Without that,
given.
you're
Yeah.
out, right? But then you have to be lucky. You have to be in the right place at the right time and do the right things, because the same thing done at the wrong time would have a totally different result. I think for me, because I've always been somehow attracted to frontier markets, I went to Hong Kong, and Hong Kong in the 70s was very different from Hong Kong today. There were a lot of opportunities. Then by 1988, I felt that Hong Kong opportunities were shrunk already but Thailand was a great place, and Thailand has just started.
Yeah.
So I went to Thailand. I
So you
spent
spot opportunities.
6 years there. Then I went back to Burma in '91, which barely opened, the first spring as I
Okay.
call it. So I was back in China, for instance, to do developments in 1980, when no one was around. As a foreign or overseas foreign investment, building a real estate project, we were the first one in Shanghai. Nobody was there. So because I am sort of attracted to be a pioneer
Yeah.
and go into emerging markets, I felt that the need to be a little more sensitive to political winds
Okay, good advice.
has helped me a great deal.
Yeah.
And without that, you don't know you're on a wrong track, and then you find yourself in a ditch somehow.
Yes.
So that's it.
All right, and Tessie, of course, your father,
Yeah, it started by my father.
yes, but I was going to say, there must be some pressure on your end, because when you took over your father's business, SMIC even grew much more. And considering that, usually people would think, why wasn't it one of the boys of the family, right? So what's your secret? People tell me that you work 25 hours a day, actually, and all you think about is business.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're a business family. No, it's not my effort. I have 5 siblings with me, and all of us are involved in the business. You just happen to see me more than my siblings. We all work hard, and that was the one main thing that my father told us, that if you don't know the subject matter and you want to compete, then you better work double time. So we did that, and we keep the ball rolling and snowballing to where we are right now.
Yeah. You actually started working when you were 16, am I correct? Right?
Yeah,
I mean, you were exposed at age.
We
Yeah.
grew up in the family. It's just a small family business at that
Called
time.
child labor nowadays.
Child
Child
labor,
labor,
yeah,
that's
today.
right.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
because parents, they're the one who commit that child labor thing. So
Okay.
so
So what's the secret to Tessie Kazan?
no, there's no secret. It's just that you just have to work hard and keep at it and work double time.
Work double time. Now, KP, for a professional, I mean, you've exceeded essentially all possible boundaries that anyone can have. You wear so many different hats. I mean, from a journalist to actually transform into not just you're an academic, you're a hotelier, you're a businessman. How did you do it? If you were to look back on your life?
I think if I had to look back on my own life, and also what I tell the students that we have graduating and they ask me about all this, I would probably say there's 2 words. I would say one is always, this is actually being used by Steve Jobs, which I think is very true. One is stay hungry,
I love that.
and the other one is never give up. To me, that's really important, because by the time any of us reach our ages, and when I talk to young people and I look back at my own past, it looks superficially now, successful person, etc. But there's been so many times when you could just give up. And never giving up is actually part of the secret of success. Just never giving up, you will already succeed. And I think staying hungry is really important, because we are hungry when we start out in life, and then we become a little bit more successful, we're less hungry, we begin to believe our own PR, we think we are God's gift to mankind. And when that happens, and you see it with a lot of successful people who think that they are the best people in the world, and they made it not through luck, but because of themselves. That's usually, and that's actually in the statistics, being a quasi-academic, 75% of the reason why CEOs fail of the Fortune 500 companies is hubris.
Yeah.
They
said.
believe they are God's gift to man. And as long as you don't believe that, you stay hungry and you never give up, you would make it in whatever you do. There's no other secret.
All right, thank you very much. I think that was such a meaningful session today. Let's give them a hand. Ho Kwon Ping, KP, Serge Pan, and Tessie Kazan.